Shedeur Sanders is taking a visit with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we had some big NBA news, which had us thinking about NFL front offices and coaching staffs here going into the draft. NFL Spotlight starts now. Welcome in. It is the Wednesday, April 9 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. I am your host, Ari Meirov. If you missed yesterday's episode, we had a special Spotlight guest of the week. We were joined by the Shrine Bowl director, Eric Galco, a really in-depth conversation about his career, his path to football, and he was at the Colorado Showcase last week. A big discussion on Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, and a lot more here about the 2025 NFL Draft. Go back an episode if you have not heard that one yet. As for today, let me bring in my good friend Ben Allen. Ben, what is going on? It's great to see you from, I think, same location, different spot, but great to see you.
Yeah, we've been relegated to the kids' room today, so I'm in front of a gray curtain. You guys are getting a sneak peek into my life, which is working from home with a wife who also works from home. Anyway, more important stuff to get to. And occasionally we like to talk about sports that aren't just the NFL here. And we are going to get to an actual NFL topic here, but it's being brought on by a very surprising story coming from the NBA. Michael Malone, the head coach of the Denver Nuggets, who just recently won the NBA Finals a year before last, has now been canned with only 3 games to go left in the season. They also fired their GM, Calvin Booth. It's come after a little bit of a tumultuous stretch for the team here. Again, like I said, only 3 games left in the season. They currently have the 4 seed in the Western Conference. They are very much expected to have a number one or a home court advantage, but they very well could lose it and try to fall into the play-in. So it got me thinking, got you thinking. There is a whole lot of importance in building through the draft, something that the Denver Nuggets were good at for a little bit. Now they've had issues with, and that has led to them being in this tumultuous situation, which is also something that a lot of NFL teams are probably going through right now, knowing that they have to nail this upcoming draft to be able to build a successful franchise and, quite frankly, keep their jobs. So my question for you is, which teams and the front offices are under the most pressure to nail the draft this year?
It's such a great question, and obviously this NBA stuff that happened on Tuesday has dominated the headlines. And I'm a front office nerd. Like I love learning about whether it's football or basketball or baseball. I love learning about how front office structures work and how they handle, everything in the front office aspect, from negotiations to analytics to working with the coaching staff to find players and draft and sign and whatever. But it's so interesting because, like you mentioned, this is a team that just won a championship a couple of years ago. You start getting more and more information. You hear about this power struggle between GM and head coach. You hear about the head coach wanting veteran players and the GM wanting to play the younger players. And this happens really in all sports, whether it is football or baseball or hockey or basketball. So it's interesting because as we go into this draft, we go back to this last GM cycle that we just had in the NFL. It started off with only one team firing their GM, and that was the Jets moving on from Joe Douglas. And as a week went by, a little bit more went on, we saw more teams move on from their GMs abruptly. There was the Raiders moving on from Tom Telesco, the Titans moved on from Rand Carthon, the Jaguars moved on from Trent Balk, and we had more GM openings. But even when the season ended, there were other GM spots around the NFL. There were true question marks that owners had to come out and put out statements to announce that they're going to come back. And I look at a team like number 3 with the Giants, number 13 with the Dolphins and Chris Greer, number 14 with the Colts and Chris Ballard. Those 3 teams in particular, to me, they have to have strong drafts, and they really have to have good seasons coming up over here in 2025 in order to maintain their jobs and survive this upcoming season. Let's start with the Giants. They're number 3. I mean, their offseason, we've talked about it a little bit here on the show over the last couple of weeks. I mean, their plan with the quarterback position after moving on from Daniel Jones during the season last year was trade for Matthew Stafford, trade up to number 1 for Cam Ward, go after Aaron Rodgers, and now eventually it's like, you know what, we're going to sign Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson. And now you're sitting with this number 3 overall pick, and we all expect Cam Ward to go number 1. There's this other quarterback out there in Shedeur Sanders, but now you have Russell Wilson, you have Jameis Winston. If you're Joe Shane, and if you're Brian Dayball and ownership announced after the year that we're keeping you, but we're running out of patience, John Maris said that on the record, you have to think to yourselves, are we just going to do whatever it takes to win this year? And that means let's just draft Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, whoever is left, and that's it. Or is Shedeur Sanders really a good quarterback? Maybe not for 2025, but we could see him being a guy over here in 26, 27, 28, and we take him. And that's a really complicated thing for a front office and head coach whenever you know that this could be your last year if you have another 3, 4, 5 win season. So there's a lot of pressure there for the Giants. There's been more and more reporting out there over the last couple of days that they have grown more comfortable with forget about the quarterback, go with Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, whoever Cleveland does not take, and move forward like that. So that's number one for me with the New York Giants. Then you go down there to the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, look at the way everyone, when the season ended, first of all, we talked about it a week before the season ended. I put Chris Ballard on the hot seat, and people around the NFL, not in Indianapolis, were like, he has survived so much throughout all of this. We gave him, a bit of a pass for Andrew Luck retiring years ago and trying to navigate through that. But going through all the quarterbacks with, I'll try to do it off the top of my head. There was Jacoby Brissett to Phillip Rivers to Carson Wentz to Matt Ryan to eventually drafting Anthony Richardson. And so far, that has not gone as planned. And now you bring in Daniel Jones with Anthony Richardson. You're going to have this competition. The one thing about Chris Ballard, and you could tell that he feels the pressure with the way he has handled free agency this offseason, them going out there and signing Cam Bynum to a big contract and signing Travarius Ward to a big contract. Anyone who knows Chris Ballard, he has not been that wave one of free agency type of a guy during his tenure in Indianapolis. He has changed the way he has handled it so far here with the Colts this offseason. For me, I look at the Colts at number 14, and it makes me wonder, are they going to be a team that tries to be even aggressive here and tries to maybe trade up in the draft? I know last year they considered it. They weren't offering some crazy things, but there is some behind the scenes videos that are out there where they were trying to move up, and the belief was it was for Brock Bowers. So I look at this draft and you look at tight end is a glaring hole on this roster. There are two guys there who are first round talents at the tight end position. Do they look at the tight end position and just take one at 14 if it drops? If one of them goes early, do they trade up? Is there a different position they're looking at over here? So the Colts and Chris Ballard and what they do in this draft, they got to nail that pick, but do they get aggressive and try to trade up? And then lastly, I mean, the Miami Dolphins and Chris Greer, another one where the owner, Stephen Ross, after the season puts out a press release. We're keeping Chris Greer. He has been there for a very, very, very long time, was elevated to GM. I believe it's almost a decade ago now. So he has been there for a long time. But look at their offseason as well. They've had a lot of these veteran players move on. Teron Armstead announced his retirement. Calais Campbell went somewhere else. Jordan Poyer, it sounds like he is leaning towards retirement as well. There's been a lot of those veteran players who were on the team last year who are moving on. They also had a player like Javon Holland leave in free agency. They saw last year homegrown players like a Christian Wilkins leave and Robert Hunt leave. So Chris Greer, whenever he has had success in the draft, they have struggled to retain some of those players. We know a couple of years ago, they really went all in on trading for veteran players, moving on from draft picks. They traded for Bradley Chubb, traded for Tyreek Hill, traded for Jalen Ramsey, and they moved on from some big-time draft picks in order to get those players, and they extended to last offseason. We know how last year went, and now you're kind of in the middle right now this year where they didn't make any crazy, insane, splashy moves in free agency. They're going to run it back with most of this roster in a salary cap situation that's not great, but they have to nail this draft because really, whenever you look at the Dolphins' draft history as of late, first of all, they've not had many picks because of the fact they've made all those trades. But when you look at all their picks, I would say Devon Nation has been, the running back has been a hit. Chop Robinson, their first round pick last year, had a super underrated, really good year. He's been a hit. Patrick Paul, their second round pick last year, is slated to take over at left tackle for Teron Armstead. But aside for that, there's been a lot of misses there. I mean, Cam Smith, their second round pick before last year, was not a hit. They did not have a first or second round pick in 2022. There have been a lot of misses here when it comes to their recent drafts, in part because they haven't had many picks. So it's big of a year for Chris Greer in Miami to hit these picks and, of course, have a competitive year in 2025, or else we will be talking about this job as well in 2025 after the season is over. But those are three front offices for me that we're keeping an eye on. Obviously, what happened with the Denver Nuggets, that's a team that is very successful and won a championship, and the Giants and the Colts and the Dolphins are not at that level. If you want to look at teams that I guess have had success, I would say the Steelers are ones to watch over here. We know the quarterback situation. We'll talk about that here in a second, but other teams as well. I would look at a team like the Kansas City Chiefs. There's no pressure there, but I look at that roster and some of the players that went on the offensive line. Are they going to address that over there? I think they're an interesting team as well down there at 31 at what they do, because the AFC West has only gotten better this offseason. What the Broncos have done, what the Chargers are going to do going into year two with Jim Harbaugh, and of course the Raiders now adding Pete Carroll and trading for Geno Smith. I think that division is much better, and we saw some of the weaknesses there with the Chiefs all of last year, winning those one possession games. Some of them, I would say, were a bit lucky. And then, of course, making it to the Super Bowl and then getting just completely manhandled by the Philadelphia Eagles. So I look at the Chiefs at 31. Their GM, Brett Veach, the last time they lost the Super Bowl, he was wheeling and dealing and moving up the board, traded up to get Trent McDuffie, of course, traded away Tyreek Hill to get more picks. I would keep an eye on Kansas City and what they do down there at 31 if they try to get aggressive as well down there at the bottom of the draft.
Yeah, well, that allows for us to have a pretty clean transition here, talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers, who you mentioned there for a moment. They, of course, are still waiting to see what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers, somebody they have not really given a timeline to as far as when they're going to sign, or he is going to sign, if at all. And that's why they are currently rocking with just Mason Rudolph. But there's a report out on Tuesday from Jordan Schultz that they are expected to meet this week with Shedeur Sanders, the number 2 quarterback coming out in the NFL draft this year. They really, really need to get this year going well, I would presume. I mean, Mike Tomlin, the last couple seasons, despite always having this winning record or finishing at 500, of late has been getting a little bit of heat for not being able to win in the playoffs, which has then drawn conversations of, is he the right guy to be there? Omar Khan has been there and different roles since 2001. These guys are very engraved in what it is to be a Steeler over the last couple decades. It seems like it'd be an important move to figure out the quarterback for this upcoming season. What do you make of the news that he could be a quarterback that the Steelers are considering, but albeit that he has to make it to pick 21?
You know, news coming out about Shedeur, the reason it was interesting to me was right, they're picking at 21. Yes, they're still waiting on Aaron Rodgers, but the elements of this is interesting to me because the Steelers have been doing quarterback work. They've had Jackson Dart in the building as well. They've had other quarterbacks who they've met with privately. They had dinner with Jalen Milrow. They've talked to some of the other quarterbacks in this draft as well. But Shedeur agreeing to do the visit is interesting because it makes me wonder, has he heard all the rumors? Has his camp heard all the rumblings out there that maybe he doesn't go at 2 or 3? And then the Steelers bringing him into the building as well is interesting because could this be them just saying, you know what, we want to do our due diligence in case he's there? Or is it also just a, hey, Aaron Rodgers, could you sign already so we don't have to keep on doing all of this? And kind of, they're not telling him, but they'll let the media and the noise out there do it for them. So those are the two angles that I took to all of this. But the Steelers know the situation. They moved on from Justin Fields. They wanted him back, but they never committed to giving him the starting job. They never wanted Russell Wilson back for the most part. They need a new quarterback. Even if they sign Aaron Rodgers, that is a 1-year stopgap. I don't think it's been reported, maybe it has, but the offer out to Aaron Rodgers is a 1-year contract. So whenever he decides to agree to it, if he does, it's going to be a 1-year thing there. So they need to find the guy. So they've been looking at this quarterback draft class just like they did in 2021 when they drafted Kenny Pickett at 20, and they looked at Malik Willis, and they looked at Sam Howell, and they looked at Desmond Ridder, and they looked at all those quarterbacks in that draft as well. They're doing the same thing in this draft now, picking one pick later at 21. So I mentioned all the quarterbacks they've brought in. They'll continue to do that. Their preference is not to have a rookie under center going into this season. Mike Tomlin has said it on the record that they are comfortable with Mason Rudolph if it ever gets to that point. But let's be real for a second. Their number one option here is Aaron Rodgers. They're waiting for him to say yes. Part of me, like I said before, does wonder if bringing Shedeur into the building at this point in the process is also them just letting it be known to Aaron, like, could you just decide already and stop holding us kind of in the dark over here? No, in the dark is not meant to be a shot at Aaron, but you know what I mean over here.
There was a
But
pun there,
it's,
Ari. There was a
yeah.
pun there. You were darkness retreat. Don't retreat
I
away
didn't
from that
mean
joke.
I didn't mean it, but as soon as I said it, I realized what I was doing there. But you get the point over here. So a part of me does wonder that as well. But Steelers have done their homework over here on the quarterback draft class. They're waiting on Aaron and Shedeur going there. He does not have an agent in this process. His family is helping him. Obviously, Dion knows the NFL inside and out, so he has the people there. But the fact that he was like, you know what, I'll go to Pittsburgh. I'll go to check out a team picking at 21 makes me wonder also if his pro day on Friday, did he hear from the Browns who had ownership and GM and the Giants who had 14 people that are including GM and head coach? Did they hear something that made them say, oh, we might have to scramble here and talk to some other teams as well? So that dynamic of it, Ben, makes it very interesting to me.
It's going to be a very, very fun, exciting, crazy couple of weeks here as we get ready for the 2025 NFL draft that kicks off on April 24th there on Thursday night. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel here to follow along with all that news. We're going to be covering the draft a lot here in the coming days. So make sure you are following along as Ari gives his insight to all the hearings that he has from around the league.
Yeah, so that will do it here for our Wednesday, April 9 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. Like Ben said, we're going to have a lot more draft coverage here, whether it's prospects, whether it's draft analysts. We're going to have all of it. And of course, just us talking as well. We'll talk about coming up next week under the radar prospects. I mentioned my mock draft, which is always on the week of the draft. So we're going to have that coming up and a lot more here on NFL Spotlight. We will see everyone here tomorrow morning on the show.